Hi, this is Joanne Dennison, CMP, and coming to you with an edition of Sit in the Attendees Chair. And very excited today to have a guest that many of you have probably heard from before and various others. I'm very fortunate. She comes on and shares her expertise and inquisitiveness with a lot of different topics. And that's Tracy Baer, CMP, CFMP. And I could tell you lots about her, all good, I promise, but I'm going to let her tell you what she wants to tell you. So go for it, Tracy.
Well, hello, I am Tracy Baer. Like Joanne said, I am a CMP and a CFMP. And if you don't know what that is a certified faith-based meeting planner. I do a lot of work with associations, nonprofit, and religious groups. And I live outside of Chicago. Married and have 2 children. I have a grandbaby on the way, which is new news.
Ooh, yeah, I was going to say I didn't know that. Yay!
Yep. And I do a lot of work with volunteers, which is typical for nonprofit and faith-based organizations, and something I'm really passionate about. And I think that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today.
Absolutely. Yes, Tracy wrote a book, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about her background. And at the beginning of the book, she explains a lot of her background. So hopefully she'll share that with you too, because I learned things I didn't know as to the scope of some of the volunteer support activities that she's been based in over the years. But her book is called Cultivating a Healthy Volunteer Team. And the subtitle is Practical Steps to Help You Engage, Equip, and Empower Your Volunteers. And I'm all excited about this because I have worked with a lot of volunteers in a lot of capacities, through my paid work, but also through, volunteer work myself. Some of you know I worked at colleges and universities, so a lot of my volunteers at times were students. And I have developed very strong feelings about some of this. I love volunteers. I love being a volunteer overall. And a lot of the things that Tracy writes about in this book definitely are in sync with what I believe. And I also learned some really cool things to think about too. So anything you want to say about the title or the subtitle first, or you want to give a little bit of that background that's it's not in the preface, but it's in the beginning about all the type of volunteer things you've been involved in so they know where you're coming from on this?
Sure. So I have been an events manager for a very large church outside of Chicago. And over the years, I have managed to work with about 500 volunteers. We had a big team. We did many kinds of events. You work with a lot of different personalities when you do that. And I also worked with an international company, an international faith-based company. And we worked with volunteers from all over the country, all over the world, actually. So it takes a different skill set when you're working with people that you go to church with, you see at school, bump into at the grocery store. You get to know their personalities. You get to know kind of, things that they like to do, and you can plug them into certain spots on your team that fit for them. But when you're working with a group of people that you've never met before, it takes an entirely different type of onboarding in order to know a little bit about them, to get to plug them into the right place. Sometimes you get it wrong. You got to redeploy them.
Redeploy. That's an interesting. This is a military action.
Yeah. Got to move them around a little bit. So you learn a lot of things doing that. Sometimes you learn lessons the hard way.
Of course.
While I was at that organization, we supported children's pastors was the main focus of that organization. And we heard over and over and over again, help me with my volunteer team. I don't know how to recruit them. I don't know how to keep them on my team. I don't know what kinds of things to train them with. Can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? And having worked with so many volunteers for so long, I actually thought people knew those things already. Because these were established churches, these were established organizations. And I had worked successfully with volunteers, and it's not to brag. It's just that the atmosphere and the team that we had was a healthy working team. So in talking with some of these pastors and trying to break down why they were having so much trouble, the book just kind of formed in my head, and I just wanted to get the information out of my head and into the hands of those who could benefit from some of the tips that I used to create these healthy teams. And so the book is put together in really tiny pieces, bite-sized pieces that if you are in crisis, if you have a trouble, you can check the glossary or check the index, go to the section that's relevant to you and read it in a few minutes or a half an hour. You can dig into it a little bit if you want, but it's something you can try today. See if it works for you, tweak it a little bit, read some more, make another change. It's not like a novel. You don't have to, read this giant thing, or it's not intimidating. They're really practical things that maybe even you thought, oh, yeah, I didn't, or I was doing that, but it was just like a click off. So that's how the book came about, a little bit about how I got here. But I love it. I continue to help people. I was just at a conference speaking a few weeks ago. I couldn't believe it was my first time speaking, and I had filled the room. So that was clearly there's still a need for help with volunteer teams.
Oh, I think totally. And one of the things when I was reading it, I made a note of that I wanted to say for listeners, especially who go, oh, well, I don't work for an association or I don't work for a nonprofit. I work for corporate, so this doesn't pertain to me. So I have two things I'm going to say to you to encourage you to stay. Well, three now that I think about it. One, you never know what your next job is going to be. Two, I don't know anyone in events that doesn't at some point get pulled into a volunteer capacity, whether it's through your kid's school, your faith-based organization, the Humane Society, any other nonprofit you're involved in. The minute they find out that you have event experience, you're going to be, as Tracy said, and we'll ask more about this, invited to be a volunteer and lead whatever their latest or next or greatest event is. So, that's one thing. Well, two things really. Don't know what your next job is going to be. You're always going to do it. And honestly, a number of the things you wrote about, I think, pertain very heavily even to paid staff. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I think about when I think of organizations and when we do very large events, even for-profit organizations, corporate and everything, depending on the size of the organization or even like associations and nonprofits that maybe have a paid team, but it's one of those things that when we have the annual convention, it's all hands on deck. Doesn't matter if you're the accountant or the HR person or the whatever you are going to be working in some capacity at that annual conference. And so even though technically they're not volunteers because they work for the organization and are being paid, at that particular point, they are way out of their comfort zone and they might as well be volunteers. So I think, and we assume that people within those organizations know everything that's going on. And come on, no more than most of us know accounting and could go sit in the accountant's chair. Are they going to be able to walk into an event and get a lot of the stuff? I mean, that's what makes us us and them. So, don't think this book does not somehow overlap into things that would be useful for you to have, because I definitely saw all that when I was reading it. So any comments on that, Tracy?
Yeah, I was intentionally trying to make it applicable for things just like that. It's really, I tried not to use language that said, religion or faith-based, to scare people away, because some people get scared off by that. Because it is really practical stuff.
Well, just before I jump to something else, I was wondering that when you were describing, I was thinking about the whole thing of being in a faith-based organization and volunteers and how you treat people and everything like that. And it's like, having been involved in a number in the past, do you think it's harder or easier? I think a lot of people would go, oh, it's easier because everyone's nice, because everything's faith-based. And, so everyone's nice to each other and they treat each other well and they listen to each other. Except my reaction is you still have every variety of people. which is the end of your, I mean, there's no guarantee because something's faith-based or even nonprofits. Most of them have very positive mission and vision statements, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's easy to work with.
Right. There's a chapter in the book about that. People in the church, everybody's welcome.
Yeah.
So you get all kinds of different personalities. We are all broken people in this life. And so, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Personalities don't always mix
Yep.
in any scenario. So yeah, sometimes it just don't click, and
Yep.
you've got to move people along. Or somebody that's been at a certain organization for years, they get kind of embedded, or they get entitled. That doesn't work either. Someone comes in brand new who has no history. They think, oh, well, I can do it better, smarter, faster. And they don't realize that all the things that they think they know better about have already been done, didn't work.
Right.
That's why we're here doing it this way, with complete disregard to the history of why we're doing it now. So,
that was something I remember being taught. I don't know what mentor taught me that, but it's true in your paid work too. Don't walk into any organization thinking they know nothing, and the first words out of your mouth should not be, where I was before was, we did this. I'm always very careful. And like you said, when I've brought up things to people and they've said, oh, we tried that, it didn't work. Well, how long ago? 5 years ago? 10 years ago? And you may be right, but what's also changed in that 5 to 10 years? I think that's a really important part to ask too. Not that they're wrong, but well, do those reasons still exist that it didn't work? Is it something to look at? And sometimes it is, and sometimes that reason still very strongly exists, I think, too.
Yeah. One of the phrases I just hate the most is, well, we all have always done it this way.
Oh.
That's like nails on a chalkboard for me.
Yep.
Just don't say that. It's
Yep.
unnecessary.
Yeah. And it's like, yes, and times have changed. I mean, we can now, I think about all the things we've used as like benchmarks over the years, the recession and, 2008 to 2012 or whatever it is. And before that, it would have been 9/11. And I know some people listening to this, probably don't really necessarily remember some of this. But, now it's the pandemic we use as it. Was it before or after the pandemic? And taking a look at it. So one of the things that I caught a couple times in the book, and you have it very early on in the preface, and at first I kind of read it and I wasn't quite sure, and then I realized I think where you're going with this, but you have reiterated it a couple times during the book. And I think it's a really important thing for anyone to use in terms of how we're defining volunteers and everything. You said, multiply the time of our paid staff. Can you explain and give some examples of that? Because I think that's a really important thing for people to think about in terms of ROI or how they sometimes position the roles of volunteers, et cetera.
Yes. I mean, there are so many jobs related to an event, or, a lot of organizations to have just daily things that they do. But if we're talking about an event, your event list could go on for days. And I mean, you're talking a faith-based or a nonprofit organization, you have a finite budget. So if you've got, say, 10 people on your staff and you've got work for 40, how are you going to get that all done? So in order to multiply the time that it takes to get all that done, so you if you invite another 5 volunteers to help you, now you've just exponentially increased the amount of work that can get done in a particular hour. So now you are, without paying additional salary, you are getting much more work done in that period of time. So you are able to get the things done to get ready for the event or to execute the event without multiplying your staff when you're working with a team of volunteers.
That reminds me of something I was told, when I started my business years ago, and I think anyone who's in a small organization will understand this. It took me a while to get it, and sometimes I forget it and have to be reminded. But in my case, they were speaking about hiring or outsourcing stuff. And they said, hire people to do the work that other people could do so you can do the work only you can do. And that kind of ties in with, in my head, with what you're saying. That paid staff that you're talking about, there's certain things only they can do.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, like what they're actually paid to do, what they're most responsible for. So by bringing volunteers in to take the roles of what other people can do, I could see what you're saying in terms of it exponentially multiplies what's getting done. And they can focus on, again, what only they can do. Because I think that happens a lot in volunteer organizations. The paid staff gets bogged down in doing the minutia, which is important, but other people can stuff packets.
Yes, and make copies and run supplies and, make schedules and order things and run to the store and, I mean, any number of things that don't require somebody's specific skill.
Well, and we could go down a whole nother path here, and maybe we'll do a podcast on delegating, because that's something I'm guessing you've spoken and written on, and I've spoken and written on. And people in the events industry tend to want to hold everything real tight because nobody can do it like we can do it.
Right.
By the time I explain it to them, I could have had it done. Yes, and if you explained it to them and they did it the next 10 times, think how much time you would have.
Yep.
But yeah, it does involve delegating. And one of the things about your book is because you're so clear, and like you said, it's a lot of it's bullet points, easy to read. You can find what you need. You can read the whole book very quickly and, go back and back and back. It's a great reference book. This is not, like a doctoral thesis of, 300 pages on the psychological analysis of how to do things with volunteers, although I'm sure there's lots of psychology behind it. But yeah, delegating is something you have to learn to do with volunteers. And sometimes people, I think, are even more, maybe this isn't what you found, more reluctant because they're not paid staff. Well, they're only volunteers, or they're just volunteers. So we can only give them the stuffing the packets, running to the store. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. People have real jobs outside of being a volunteer. They're doctors, they're accountants, they're event planners. They, have any number, the policemen, they're any number of things. They have skills. They could be working in HVAC or electricity or plumbing. They could actually bring a skill to your team. That's one of the points in the book, that they could fill a gap without having to pay somebody to do it. They could be training other people on your team for you. They could be leading a team of volunteers for you in a volunteer capacity. They could have leadership skills. There's all kinds of things that they do outside of volunteering for you that could also benefit you and your organization.
I was just sitting here thinking, like, where did that concept, that initial thought come from? And you know what I sadly think I bet it is? It's a very sexist thing. It was all the moms who weren't working outside the home, being paid, and they were all the volunteers. Doesn't mean, again, a lot of them had whole lives before they had kids. And I'm not talking just the 50s, 60s, 70s. Well, a lot of the moms in the 50s were the ones who were working in the factories and doing a lot of the, quote, men's jobs in the 40s. But I wonder if that's how that started. Well, they're just moms, or they're, please, anyone who hears this, please know this is not my philosophy at all. Just so if you listen to only half of this, don't think that. But, like, where did that come from? Well, they're just volunteers.
And I think because they're not paid, the expectation is low.
We only put value on things that are paid. Good point.
Well, they're only here 5 hours a week and I'm not paying them, so they can't possibly know anything.
Right.
In life, because I only know them as this unpaid person who, shuffles papers or carries, bananas back and forth, or, picks up supplies from Walmart. But they do so much more than just that for you in their daily lives. So once you get past that, they're not paid. They can do so many more things. I'm a member of this church that I partner with on a lot of events, and we have whole teams of people led by volunteers that are not paid, and they do a ton of work just because it's something that they enjoy doing, and giving of their time is something that they enjoy to do with the church. Training others is something they love to do. I love to help people with volunteers, get their teams to be healthy. I like to share the information that I have gained over years of experience event planning with my blog. So I don't get paid for any of that. Um, it's just something that I like to do. There are many people like that. Um, they'll just lend a hand for nothing.
Well, and I think a lot of times I found people who volunteer and they love their volunteer work, and it's their way of balancing out potentially a paid job that they really don't like.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they may need to stay there or do that job, but this allows, and we'll talk about it more in a minute, people to learn new skills or utilize talents that they don't get to use in their paid life. And it helps balance out things like that, I think, too.
Yeah.
So one of your early ons, you're talking about, job descriptions, and anyone who's taken my class for CMP knows I talk about this, and it's moving from human relations to talent management, and the newer, just to put context, what is this? May of 2025. So maybe that has some context for some of you. But I'm adamant about volunteer roles need to have job descriptions.
Absolutely.
And why don't you talk a little bit about that, but also, or maybe we should go back and start about, you don't talk about, no. Okay, everyone. Now I had 5 thoughts just to all collide in my head. We're going to start over again here, not literally, but okay, job description. Except you don't call it a job description. What do you call it and why? I thought this is one thing I walked away big time with this.
Call it a position description or a role description instead of a job description, because a job description implies that somebody's getting paid to do it. And a volunteer is clearly not getting paid. So by calling it a position description or a role description, and calling these roles or positions or responsibilities, just makes that mind shift that there's something different than a paid job. They're clearly a volunteer, but you still have to have the expectations of the role. If there's hours or if there's physical expectations, what the actual role entails, can they do it? If there's a specific skill that they need, they absolutely have to have a job description, or they're not going to know if it's something that they're going to want to do with you. It's like any other job. You want to have a conversation, like an interview. If their personalities don't mesh with yours, that's not somebody you want to have volunteering on your team, or maybe in this capacity. So yeah, it's much like a job, just interview and responsibility description.
And I think one of the things, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Okay.
I apologize, is something I hate hearing in the world of volunteers is this feeling, whether it's directly said or not said, that any warm body will do.
Yeah.
That just, like, I can feel the hair go back up on my neck. It's like, no, 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 no. And I think that's a lot of what you talk about and what you just spoke about now and what you talk about in the book is, no, you have to find the right people for the right job. And I think we get really lazy about that, or we think we don't have the right because we are not paying them. And I'm thinking, no, I'd rather have nobody than the wrong body in a position.
Well, you're doing them a disservice too, because you're setting them up for failure. If you don't put them in a position that they can actually function in, they're going to not want to come back. This is how teams come apart. People are in the wrong positions. They're stuck with people they don't get along with. They're not equipped with the right skill, materials, supplies, whatever, and they go. I mean, that's not a healthy team.
And another thing I kind of want to jump back to is this whole idea of not recruiting volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you go off that line?
So you have to lead with the relationship. It's so militant when you recruit somebody. Nobody wants to be recruited to do anything, but you want to be invited. You want to be invited to coffee. You want to be invited to go shopping. You want to be invited to the movies. Why wouldn't you want to be invited to an opportunity to share your gifts and talents with a team of people or with somebody else, or be invited into a chance to make something great, like an event for this group of people that are coming? Who knows what kind of group you're having? Just it's so much. You'll get a better response if you say, "Would you like to join me in, helping to set this event up on Saturday afternoon for a group of teenagers who are on a retreat from or college, whatever." It's so much nicer and easier to make that invitation than saying, "I've got to recruit 10 people who are going to set up chairs and, tables and put tablecloths on." And that's just a terrible way to ask, but it's a recruitment mindset. It's that militant mindset. And it's an off-putting way to ask. But if you lead with the relationship, because it should be a relationship, if you're going to have a healthy team, if you're going to keep people on your team, you're also going to want to get to know them, learn their birth date. What's their name? Are they married? They're just like, not all in one sitting. You're not going to grill them or anything, but as they serve with you, you're going to want to get to know them over time, because eventually you'll know then what their talents are, what their talents are not, how their personality is with groups of people. And so you better place them on team for different roles as you get to know them. But if you don't have a relationship with them, you'll never be able to do that. But as you do that, then the team grows, it's healthier. Then you can find, are there leaders on my team? Which one can I raise up to lead a team of people that I don't have to lead, so I can continue to go and do other things? So you've got to lead with the relationship.
Well, I think also inviting it reminds me of how many times I've been in organizations where they say, well, we don't have enough volunteers. And it's like, so how are you doing it? And you find out they need them for whatever, the golf committee or whatever it is. And they're like, well, we've posted it. We've put it out on social media. We've, all this kind of things, and no one's coming forward. And, through my MPI leadership experience and also, Girl Scout boards and everything, one of the things, there was a Girl Scout council in New Jersey that had a poster. Okay, people, this is back in the day before we had social media, but its message was so good. It said something about, maybe, I still have this poster because it had such an impact on it. Maybe you haven't volunteered because nobody's asked you yet. And then it goes on to say, we are asking you now. And granted, it's still not the personal connection that you're talking about, but it's the whole idea. What I've run into is a lot of people don't volunteer for positions, whatever you want to call them. They don't volunteer because they think they're not qualified. And
someone else is doing it.
Right. Like, you have enough. You don't need any more people. And I remember being chastised years ago. I had to get up and give an announcement about like nominations for the MPI chapter board that I was involved in. And I basically, I must have seen this poster by now. And I was thinking about it. And I said, you may think you're too new. Because when I ended up on my board, I was like, why would you want me? I'm really new to this organization. But I said, maybe you think you're too young. Maybe you think you don't have enough experience. Maybe you think you're too new to the chapter. And no, if this is something you have interest to, and I got chastised when I got set down by the president, like, you made it sound like we're desperate. And I was like, no, I just want everyone to know that there are opportunities for them. And yes, they are qualified for something. They may not be able to be president this year, but, 3-5 years down the line, it might work out. So I think that idea of inviting and overcoming that assumption that, oh yeah, they got plenty of people. People have come forward. I saw it posted, but they don't really want me. Like that insecurity that they don't have enough to bring forward. And that's one of the things I loved when you said that whole idea about invite them, don't recruit them.
And word of mouth is always the best method of growing a team. Not a poster, not an announcement, not a
social media.
It's, who do you know? Mm-hmm. Who would you want to work alongside of? Do you have neighbors? Do you have friends? Do you have family members? Is there somebody in your community group? Invite them along with you. Do it together. So word of mouth is always the best way to build a team, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, I think so. When, especially if it's something you're passionate about. Like I'm trying to think of some of the big things, especially when I was living in New Jersey, which is where I spent most of my adult life. And I think about my church, where I was heavily involved, and my Girl Scout Council, which again, heavily involved on the board, didn't have kids. No one could understand why I would do it when I didn't have kids. And MPI. And I think because of my passion about all of them, and it just grew the more, I can't say there weren't days I wasn't frustrated, of course, but what I learned and the people, I'm still connected to so many people that I met a very long time ago because I volunteered with them. And we built those teams. Like you said, it's personal. It's very personal. And if you're on a team with them for a long time, even maybe more than a workplace, because a workplace, a lot of people put barriers up, especially about their personal life. But if it's volunteering, you watch the ups and downs of people's lives, which I think automatically kind of makes you closer because they're real people then. Anything you want to add so far? I mean, I have notes, but anything.
Go ahead. I didn't know which direction you want to go. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it changes moment to moment. So. Let's talk about one of the things you have is the whole concept of 4 types of volunteers and what they can bring or not bring or potentially even do damage to a situation. You want to talk about that? I thought that was pretty interesting.
Sure. So as you're leading a team, you can't just ignore that there are sometimes problematic or challenging personalities on your team because they can undermine the health of your team if they're not addressed. Somebody who is maybe not getting along with a person might just leave your team. They might not even tell you. They might just not come back because they are volunteers. They don't have to tell you they're not coming back. It's not like a job where they say, I quit, I'm leaving. They might just stop showing up. So if you notice that somebody's one of these personalities, you might just chat with them a moment. Or you might have to, there are sometimes you might have to actually ask somebody to leave your team for either a period of time or indefinitely. Excuse me. But that's part of being the leader of a team. Sometimes you have to have a crucial conversation. But one of the types of people I like to call the tried and true. These are usually rock star volunteers. They're the ones that are serving on a regular basis. They show up early, they stay late. They're always asking, what can I do? They usually end up in a volunteer leader role. They can help onboard others, train others up with, how the team operates and show people around. Occasionally, a tried and true person are one of those volunteers that end up being around too long. They start to feel entitled or superior or like this is their team. It doesn't happen all the time. Again, it's a unique situation. However, one of those volunteers that are the tried and true, this is my baby, could undermine what you're trying to do. If you want to change the team, if you're trying to take things in a new direction, they're the ones that usually put the brakes on. So you just have to watch somebody that's a tried and true volunteer. There's good and bad. Then I call this one the talker. This one is usually a great asset to the team. They are engaging. They're usually extroverts. They are welcoming people on the team. They can talk to a doorknob. They can get people out of their shell and introduce this person to that person. They're not shy about speaking in front of people if you need somebody to pull a group together and give them some instructions or whatever, entertain somebody. They're usually really good about that. However, sometimes they can get chit-chatty and they can corner somebody who is just too polite or doesn't know how to get out of a conversation, and then nothing's getting done. These two volunteers are off, standing somewhere in a corner. One poor volunteer is just shrinking. The other one is just yappity yap. So you might have to just intervene. Like, hey, Sally, why don't we move on to another task, or it looks like you guys have been over here quite a while. And we do need to get these things done. So if you wouldn't mind, moving along, or you just might have to separate them, or depending on what they're talking about, you might need to, intervene in a different way. So we got to watch those talkers. You have a complainer. This one, unfortunately, is somebody who could be quietly toxic. Any leader who's served long enough has unfortunately probably encountered one of these. They could be just negatively inclined. They're going to complain. They're going to complain about anything. They could be complaining about somebody that they're working alongside. They're complaining about the responsibility that you gave them to do. They're complaining about the time that they had to get in there in the morning, or how late they have to stay, or whatever it is. And they may not come to you. They may just grumble to the person next to them, or they may grumble to somebody that's they're serving. Like if they're working with the guest, they might be grumbling while a guest walks up. I mean, you've got to watch those folks, and they eventually rise to the surface because people are like, they don't want to work with this person. So it doesn't take long for this kind of person to rise to your attention. And they definitely have to be attended to, because that can take down a team pretty quickly. If you are too afraid to have a crucial conversation, or too comfortable asking them to leave your team or take a hiatus, you need to have somebody go with you, or you need to learn how to have, you need to get that leadership skill, because that person can really do some damage to your team.
And you know what's interesting, I think, about a lot of people like that? They don't even see or think of themselves as a complainer. Mm-hmm. Because they kind of operate in that mode all the time.
Yep.
Like, glass half empty type thing. That, yep. Like, if you said to them, why are you complaining, or worded it some other way, I mean, I've seen people like that look at me, in shock. Like, what do you mean? I'm not, and they're not playing a game. They honestly don't think what they're doing is complaining. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, trying to turn that one around. But yes, it's the whole Debbie Downer thing. It's someone who can bring down everything.
Yep.
If they're miserable, everyone's going to be miserable type thing.
Yep.
And again, there's some who I think do it very, like, that is their purpose. I'm miserable, you're going to be miserable. And then I think there's others that just kind of have that low-level grumbling, like you said. It's just kind of the way they speak and look at everything.
Yeah, I've encountered volunteers that they just see life differently.
Yeah.
Like, I would say, look at this great sunshine. And they'd be like, it's too hot.
Yeah.
It's not that, it's hot today, yes. But I would rather like to say the sun is shining and see it in a positive perspective. They just have that negative bent.
Yeah.
They're not always terrible, and they could be great volunteers if they're, in the right capacity, or perhaps they're working alone. But, you just got to watch them in a crowd.
Yeah, and you're right. They can definitely let it roll off onto the guest, too.
There's one last kind, and I don't encounter these very often, but when you have them, they can suck the life out of you. I had one in particular. I still encounter her every once in a while, and I hate when I see her coming, and I hate myself for that, but she can so suck the life out of me. I call her the melancholy. She is not happy unless somebody is attending to her. She loves the drama. She's so dramatic. Everything in life. She needs a counselor. She needs, a pastor. She needs somebody to, help her with whatever emotional disaster she's having today. And she's a perfectly healthy, normal person. She just needs attention. She wants to be the center of attention because her life is just terrible. And it's not. But in her mind, or in today's, whatever, she just feels like if she's not the center, if the universe is not revolving around her, then she is not happy.
It's kind of borderline narcissism.
Yes, it just sucks the life out of you, because it's not even done in a arrogant way. It's just so sad. It,
Yeah.
it just brings the whole room down. It's like cold when she walks in. And I've had a couple of these, one in particular, but they're they're it's hard to work with one of these. Um,
Well, and especially, I'm thinking about a situation, you're at a fundraiser for, maybe your organization or a different organization. You're feeding. Please know I'm not saying this sarcastically or lightly. You're trying to feed orphans in wherever, like literally, children are dying from hunger, and this person's going to tell you how bad their life is, and it's like, slight disconnect right here. Not to say that you don't have issues in your life. We all do, and they go up and down from extremes, but we're focusing on the children that are dying right this minute from hunger. It's like
yeah,
they can't make that jump somehow.
yep. And sometimes, I mean, they may truly have something going on in their life, and they need to have somebody
Right.
intervene. They need a counselor. They might need a priest or somebody with actual training in how to handle the need that they have. This could be their cry for help. So I'm not discounting that you do need to
Right.
have people, but there is also times when they need to have an intervention just because they need to maybe again take a hiatus from the team or go have their issue dealt with in a more healthy way than just verbally vomiting on the person sitting next to them or the guest that they're serving.
And
So
I think, it jumps over to paid employees too.
mhm,
People are people, whether they're being paid or not. And there's
yep.
sometimes, and I think this is why some workplaces at least are beginning to really, and of course we're wrapping up Mental Health Month right now, is realizing that we can't just ignore these things because
Mhm.
it will have not only do we need to take into consideration that particular person, but the effect it has on everyone and everything around it in any organization, and whether everyone is paid or everyone's a volunteer. Things have to be addressed. We can't pretend that they are not going away, or that they will go away. But yeah, I really liked that section. When I read it, I thought you had really kind of thought out the personality types. And again, I think a lot of that carries into the paid workplace too.
Yeah.
I think so much of your book could be transferable into paid work also. So here's one along those lines about looking, we talked about recruiting versus inviting, and we talked about how I feel at least about that any warm body will do. No, 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 no. And another one that I've dealt with clients, when I've gone in and worked with organizations and everything, in the other part of my life in GCGU, is people say, well, they're volunteers, I can't fire them. Oh, yes, you can in my book. Oh, yes, you can. And
Absolutely.
at times you need to, and I think that's part of what you're saying. And the intervention, they may need to take a hiatus.
Yep.
Yes, I'm going to tell you, Tracy may use different words, but yes, I do believe you can fire a volunteer. And I think sometimes it's absolutely necessary to fire a volunteer. If you want to use a different word instead of fire, that's fine. But just because they volunteer doesn't mean you need to keep them or keep
Right.
them in the role they're in. So why don't you roll with that one?
Oh, it can undermine your team absolutely. If you've got somebody that's either in the wrong role, if they show up late constantly, that if they are doing the role wrong and they're not open to remediation or to relearning how to do the role, it's the same as in the workplace. If they're disrespectful, if they're any one of these type personalities that need an intervention, you're not getting your work done. They're not helpful. The volunteers are there to be helpful. If they're somehow undermining your organization in any way, they've got to go, because that's going to could take down even more than your team. They could be embezzling money. You have no idea. They could be stealing supplies. I mean, who knows what's happening there? But if you find any of this inappropriate behavior, they've got to be fired. You definitely got to say you can't come back, for an X amount of time, or at all. We've got a banned list, or whatever you want to call it. We call it a do not serve list or may not serve list. Some people have
Oh, okay.
ended up having criminal histories,
Mm-hmm.
or and we do a screening process before they get on the team, but
Yep.
sometimes they end up
Happens.
getting into trouble, and they end up on a do not serve list. There's certainly kinds of histories that cannot work with children. They're on a not serve list. And if we've discovered that and it hasn't come up before, they have to go.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you definitely, if they're not helpful, if they're not providing the volunteer help that they have volunteered for, you might have to ask them to leave.
Well, and here's a similar but flip side. Like we're talking about people who have negative effects in terms of their behavior or their past or something. And I had an eye opener back when I was actually serving as president of one of the MPI chapters, and there was a person we loved. She had moved up, definitely. She was on the board, and this was when the boards were structured differently, but it doesn't matter. She was a leader in our group. Well, what happened was things were not getting done in her organization. Part of it was she wasn't delegating. But the other thing that had happened, and she was a relatively, oh God, was she still in her 20s? Maybe late 20s? Corporate planner, top of her game, everything. She had been diagnosed with MS.
Mm.
And, she was still learning all about this. And this was when, that was probably the beginning of maybe some of the new things that are around now. I mean, I'm talking 20 years ago, probably. But so finally, because everyone was getting frustrated because she was like communication or something. So like newsletter wasn't getting done and this wasn't getting done. That wasn't. We loved her to this day. I can picture. I know who she worked with. I know her first name. I can't remember her last name. She was one of the best people you could ever meet. So if I said to her, hey, let's get together. And I said to her, I said, hey, this is the situation. And, we all understand that you're struggling with this new life situation with your health and everything like that. But, do you really think you can do this job at this point? And she's like, I really want to. I don't want to let you down. I don't want to. And I said, and I've had to use this, and I've worked with other people where I've had to use it too. I said, we know you want to. We know you would have been good. You can't do it now. And actually, although you don't mean to, you end up letting us down by staying in the position when you're not currently capable of doing it. And I found that a lot of times when I've gone to people in volunteer roles that aren't doing what you need them to do, they're doing the best they can, genuinely. Maybe they underestimated because they didn't have a job description or whatever it would involve, but they're reluctant to withdraw because they would be letting the organization down. So it's like, and it's genuine, it's from their heart. Like they don't want to walk away and leave you empty-handed, except you're already empty-handed, but you have someone in the position and you need them to get out of the position so you can put someone in. I don't know. Thoughts on that?
Yes. So oftentimes, too, in the same vein, we've got people that are serving in more than one ministry,
Yep.
more than one department, and it's too many for them. Try to limit people to 2 departments at the tops, because it gets to be too many. And they, like you said, they start missing things, or, they just start disappointing you unintentionally. But we give them permission to leave. It's, we're like, they need you to say, it's okay for you to step away from this because we know that it's too much for you. But it's like they need you to give them permission to go.
Exactly. I agree.
They don't want to be the ones to say, I have to step back. But if you see it in them and say to them, it's okay. You need to take care of you, or you need to, we are taking care of you for you. We're asking you to step down from one of these things, so that you can better care for the other 2 departments or whatever, make margin in your schedule. So.
And now that you say that, I know I've used that exact word with people. I am giving you permission to quit. It's okay. Nobody's going to hate you. No one's, and you can come back sometime when, in this role or another role when things are different. And the look of relief.
Yes. they literally sigh,
Yeah.
or you just see the weight lift off their shoulders when you do that.
Because they were trying to fix it. They were trying, these were the people who were really, really trying to do good. And it just was the wrong time. It was the wrong
They're
time.
often your tried and trues.
Yes. Yes. Because, like you said, they will volunteer for another committee or another or whatever. Back to job descriptions. And, sometimes you look in your life and you realize you did something really right and you have no idea how you had the knowledge to do that. But it turns out it was really right. So I did become president of the chapter like 3 years after I got involved. It was a very fast track. And like I knew the immediate board, but I didn't know a lot of other people. And, I was trying as hard as I could. But when we were putting together when the nominations committee put the slate together and the elections happened, I discovered I knew less than half the people who were going to be on my board. And I was president. And that was scary to me, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't even know part of these people if they walked in the room, and they'd been around the chapter longer than I had. So what I ended up doing, I have no idea why I had this thought to do this. I took them each to lunch. Mm-hmm. And especially the ones who I knew nothing of, and I can picture them so clearly, I said, what do you need to get out of this role? And somewhere around that time, I realized that we all have motivations for volunteering, and we may have more than one motivation. But what I wanted to make sure, since this was a professional organization at least, that they walked away with something that would also help their career. It would feel good. And so, what do you want to learn? What do you want to do? What do you need more experience in? Again, have no idea how I knew to ask this question. Don't know that I ever asked it before in my life. But it was amazing, because that's when I really discovered that people like my corporate planners were like, can I be on the special events committee? I am so tired of doing pharma meetings, that kind of thing. They wanted to do something with more glitz and glamour, or someone was like, oh, I'd really like to work on the newsletter because I don't know graphic design. This is when we still printed them. I'd like to get more familiar with graphic design, or I really like to write. And it was like, and one of the biggest things I learned is if you meet their motivation, they will seldom let you down. Mm-hmm. Because it's not them just being asked or being told to do something. It's something they are doing for themselves. Mm-hmm. And fast forward a couple of years, and now I was serving as president of a chapter at a different organization, and I was at the national, leadership training for that organization. And I remember one of the national presidents was facilitating, and she says, okay, I want you to write down right now, why do you want to be in this leadership role? And then she looked and she goes, and here's what I'm going to tell you. You cannot write, oh, I want to give back to this organization. It has given me so much. I just want to pay it back. She goes, that is absolutely not. She says, sounds good, may even be true, but that's not the answer I want. I want to know from you, why are you really volunteering for this? What do you need to get out of it? And we all just sat there because of course everyone was getting ready to say, oh, I love this organization. I've gotten so much out of it. Everyone was going to say that, And for me, that was an eye-opener. And ironically, it came a couple years after I had done the thing with my board, but I realized then why it worked. That was kind of, and she may have been the one that talked about find people who are motivated they need those things and put them in those roles. But I think that's something we need to identify too. And I bet you being in faith-based, you even get more of that. Like, I want to give to the church. I'm not being sarcastic, people. I have donated tons of hours to churches over the years and everything. But it's like, yeah, but there's got to be another motivation. I don't know. Thoughts?
Community, yeah. They're looking for community. They just moved into the neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
They're coming to church and they need to find their people. Like, where's my community?
Yep.
Sometimes, people have just had a baby. So now they're home all the time with the baby. Mm-hmm. And they need an opportunity to get out of the house. So, husband's home now, and I'm going to go serve for an hour. it's an opportunity for them to go and do something different. There's definitely different motivations that are, just great.
And sometimes people just won't say them because it sounds selfish. Like, I need to get away from the baby for an hour.
Yeah.
Nope,
Yeah.
not
Nobody
selfish at
wants to
all.
say that out loud. You feel like a terrible mom when you do that.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's another thing is, maybe as we look for volunteers, there's one organization I belong to now, and basically I belong to it because of the community, because I have moved so much and not been able to be involved and, set up some of the relationships I would like to. And I pay dues basically to make sure I have that community of people in my life. That sounds terrible. I think I'm buying friends, that says. Anyway, well, because so many of my friends are not physically local. They're people like you. I'm in Massachusetts. You're in Illinois. You're a great friend. We talk, we text, we whatever. But I don't go have coffee with you, that kind of thing, or tea or whatever. So, if you're looking for volunteers, look for people who maybe need community of some kind. Their children are grown, or they haven't had children, or like you said, they moved. I discovered that when I lived in 4 states in 3.5 years, it's very tough to build a community when you move. People with kids, the kids are in school and they connect with other parents or something, but other people, not so much. Not so much. One of the other things I just wrote a note a little while ago about is where you talked about respecting your volunteers and being prepared and being ready. And talk on that for a bit, because it hit home with something I had started doing, ironically, in my church before I left New Jersey. But go ahead, your ball, roll with it.
It's a huge thing that people skip the step, and it's one of the biggest reasons I think people don't stay with a team or are dissatisfied with their team, is that the leader is just not ready. They're not prepared. They haven't taken the time to put training materials together, or make a schedule or a role description, or even put the room together. Like if you're having, like, say we're doing a big event and we have like a volunteer central and we need you to check in here. This is where you get your t-shirt and your, lanyard or whatever. And, they're supposed to be here at 4:00 and it's 3:59 and you're throwing things in the room. You look like haphazard and you look disorganized without even saying a word. Volunteers think already, well, I can't trust this leader. They're not even organized. So it can say a lot when you're not prepared. But if you don't even have time in your schedule because you didn't think ahead to make margin in your schedule to even do those things, what does that say about your leadership?
Well, and I think one of the messages that it also gives, and I think this is, you're right, I think a lot of volunteers leave because they find themselves standing around a lot. And, basically you're saying their time is not valuable. And the example I'm going to give is, so when I did live in New Jersey and belonged to this church, and one of the events we were responsible for was a service auction, which was it was one of the biggest events in our church in every way, financially, and et cetera. And of course, not surprisingly, I ended up in charge of decorations and room setup and, things like that. We had a different theme every year. And so what I realized was I hated when I would show up and I'd say, okay, what do you need us to do? And they're like, well, and I'm thinking, so, we spend the first 20 minutes and then people start digging stuff out that don't know what order things have to do. Excuse me. But what I realized is I started preparing much better. I started thinking, okay, we need the tables covered. We need lights up here. We need this. We need that. This is the centerpiece. So from the minute we started, if we were supposed to start set up at 4, I could say to a group, okay, I need people to do this. This is how we're covering the tables. And I would show them, sometimes had a sample made up. I said, someone needs to do this, this, this. And what they were shocked about was, one, they were busy the whole time, which is what they preferred. And we got out of there much sooner. And I think that really made me think, how disrespectful we are to people for things when we're not prepared. And when I was reading your book, that really hit me. Like, if people get there and they're standing around for 20 minutes or a half hour.
Waiting for you to get your stuff together.
Right, exactly. So go ahead, comment on that. And I'm grabbing a water bottle so I stop coughing in everyone's ear.
Yeah, it's people make fun of sometimes of my spreadsheets and my checklists, but I'm telling you, anybody who's ever served on my team will tell you that when they got there, everything was set up and ready to go. They knew exactly what they were going to do. They knew exactly how long it was going to take them. When they signed up to serve on a team, because they had their job descriptions, because they had their schedule, because they knew what time, what day, where to go, what to wear, they were ready. Nobody was standing around. Sometimes they were almost too busy, and we had to give them extra help. But there were maps for the building, so they knew where to go. If people are just standing around doing nothing, again, like you said, it's disrespectful. But if I haven't set them up to do their job well, that's also disrespectful. And it's also not how you build a healthy team. People are not going to stay if you constantly are not ready when they get there.
I think sometimes they deliberately come late.
Right.
Because they know,
They're not
we
ready.
won't be doing anything the first 15 minutes because the stuff is still packed in the car, you know, or something like that.
Or if they didn't sign up to take the stuff out of your car.
Right.
They signed up to put the decorations up, and now they're hauling stuff out of your car so they get the decorations up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those are some of my thoughts. How would you like to, I don't know if wrap up is the right word, because I think this is something we should be and could be and can be thinking about forever. And again, I think so much of it pertains not just to our volunteers, but to any team you are working with. Thoughts? What's your big messages you want to make sure people take home and utilize, hopefully?
The teams that kind of come apart, or when people ask me, how can I maintain my team? How can I keep people on my team? It's because they're not being appreciated. So, when the big event is over, they gather everybody in a room and say, thanks, everybody. Have a great day. We appreciate all your help. Or sometimes they don't even thank them at all because they're volunteer. They're like, well, that's what you signed up for. That's not how you keep people around. It's not how you have a healthy team. Again, when you're leading with a relationship, and you've learned their birthday, send them a birthday card. It does not cost much to send them a birthday card or an email. The handwritten card really is better. Or, if you've got the funds and the time, make sure there's something, a snack or coffee for them when you get there, appreciate them. Do a closing dessert or something, or, on a completely different season when they're not serving, call them up or gather the team for a training or an appreciation dinner or something. Because if you only contact them when you need them to serve, they're going to think that's all you want them for. You don't even call them other times of the year. You know what I'm saying? There's got to be the relationship that continues beyond the moment that you're having them serve. So you've got to appreciate them, thank them for what they've done, celebrate the wins for the time that they were there. It doesn't have to be like if they just came that day to, type a letter for you. But, for the big things that they've done, or after the year of service, when they renew their commitment to you, at that time, take them out for coffee, something like that. But if they don't feel that not only are they not respected, or that they're not making a difference, if they're not appreciated, and yes, they're not being paid, that's not what they're doing it for, but everybody likes to be appreciated for the work that they're doing.
Well, and some would argue that because they're not being paid is even more important for showing your thank you and appreciation. I mean, I can argue either way, because I think with paid people, I've been told, I think that's something that I really try to do with people is thank them and show them my appreciation and what they've brought to the table. And people will say, and sometimes they even say, well, I'm just doing my job, or, well, they're paid to do that. Just because someone's paid to do that doesn't mean that genuine appreciation should not be shown. And maybe that's just something we don't do well, period. Whether it be volunteer or paid but everyone wants to know that they added value to something.
And that you saw them.
And they what?
That you saw them.
Yes.
You saw that they were doing their thing, that they were seen that day. Somebody appreciated that they were there. And, they didn't just go through their day in and out. Nobody even acknowledged that they were there. So, yeah.
And that was another thing I liked. We could go on forever on. Oh yeah, on this was where you talked about how staff, other staff from your organization, needs to treat and interact with volunteers on site, even if they're not reporting to them. I'm probably wording it badly, but someone else who was in your organization who might be VP of Finance or VP of Marketing or whatever, they may not follow meetings and events, and they may not really even be dealing with the volunteers. But they should interact and acknowledge. They shouldn't just, it's not just Tracy's volunteer. It's the organization's volunteer. And everyone in the organization and or on a board or anything like that should be thanking the volunteers for what they're bringing.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So, well, hopefully we've at least, laid out some thoughts. It really is. I'm not saying this just because she's on here. It is a really great book. Like she said at the beginning, it's very easy to read. Not that it's dumbed down in any way, shape, or form. It's very streamlined. It's organized. It's a way to find things that you can utilize, refer. This is something that you can refer back to a number of times when, you're being told, well, your team could, operate better, or we need more volunteers, or whatever. A lot of really good information here. We will have the links in wherever we can, Linktree and LinkedIn and in the eGuide and on YouTube, wherever we can put links to buy her book. And I hope you do. I think it's well worth the investment. There's someone else. And also, she made a reference. We should have said this at the beginning. Want to tell them about your blog, even though it's not totally on volunteers. You want to tell them about your blog?
Sure. I write a blog for event planners called Tracy's Tidbits. And it's just information that I have gleaned over the years, trying to shorten the learning curve for others. And they're witty little snippets. They take just a couple of minutes to read, but they do have some helpful information to try and make it easier for others and just get the information that's in my head and out for others to take.
Well, one of the very cool things that you'll find, we're beginning to look at the world of meetings and events larger. I mean, EIC is as to who can hold the CMP, colleges and universities. It may be sporting events, it may be festivals, it may be all kinds of things. And Tracy's posts are frequently about types of events that you might not really think of. Like, I'm trying to think. Didn't you do a rodeo? Yep. Didn't you do a polo one also?
I did a polo one, yep.
Yeah. And was there one recently on tea? No. I just always want everything to be about tea. There was one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Women's tea.
I didn't make that up. But yeah, if it says tea, I'm like just assume they all should be about tea. But what is it?
I did a horse show.
Horse show, that's right. Did you do one on your big apple picking event?
I don't think I did yet. It's written. I don't know if I released it.
Okay. Yeah, the apple picking or the outdoor concert with the bad weather and everything like that.
With the bad weather, yep.
Yep. So a lot of interesting information, just makes you think about other types of events and see them through your own filters. Like, oh, that's similar to the type of events I did, or, oh, I never would have thought of that type thing. So for those of you who are in my CMP community, it's posted in there, but also it's directly, where do they get to it? Where do you normally, is it on?
You can get it at tracybaer.com.
Oh, at your website. Okay. Mm-hmm. I guess I really should have known that
or
before.
Miss Tracy's Tidbits. It's my website is Miss Tracy's Tidbits.
Okay. Sounds
It's
good.
the direct site.
Well, thank you so much for chatting for an hour. I think we
We could do it
actually,
all
yeah.
day.
Oh, we're a little over an hour. We did good though. So thank you so much. And like I said, there's other podcasts that she's been guest on, and we were discussing one or two already before we came on today. So Tracy will hopefully stay in my sphere for a while. And thank you so much for listening today. And always love to hear feedback. What did you get out of it? What do you wish we would do more on? And just really hope you always walk away with at least one thing you can use. So thanks so much from myself and from Tracy. And this is Sit in the Attendees Chair. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.